Well, good evening. It's been a busy night tonight in Parliament. Parliament has been voting on the government's controversial Rwanda bill, which aims to stop the small boats crisis. The amendment, tabled by Bill Cash, has been rejected. You can see the scene live now in the Commons. Earlier, MPs voted 529 to 68. That's a majority of 461. Well, the Cash amendment was supported by the DUP today, but the amendment tabled by the former Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, was also defeated. MPs voted 525 to 58, a majority of 467. Rebel MPs fear the bill, as it stands, will overwhelm courts with appeals from asylum seekers. Well, following the voting on the Rwanda bill tonight, the Tory Deputy Party Chairman Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith both resigned, a resignation which the Prime Minister, we understand, in the last half an hour has accepted. They were told ahead of the vote that any MP on payroll who didn't vote in favour of the government's bill would be sacked. Both have consistently argued that the government's Rwanda legislation should be strengthened. They now say they don't want to distract the Prime Minister from his work on illegal migration. Well, also in the news today, oil prices went up and a major oil company suspended its shipping routes in the Middle East. Oil giant Shell indefinitely suspended all its shipments through the Red Sea. That came as oil prices rose by 1%. The Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, just last week, warning attacks in the region could impact prices here in the UK. And on the military front, a United States official confirmed its planes targeted 4 Houthi anti-ship missiles off the coast of Yemen in fresh strikes against the Iran-backed group over its disruption to commercial shipping. Now, today in the post office scandal, a Fujitsu boss today accused post office officials of knowing about the bugs and errors in the Horizon IT system. The Business and Trade Committee heard from key figures involved in the post office scandal, including Fujitsu executive Paul Patterson, who apologised and admitted that his company had a moral obligation to contribute towards compensating victims. The wrongly accused former postmaster and leader of the Sub-Postmasters Alliance, Alan Bates, blamed red tape for delays to compensation payments. There are further signs today that the jobs market is cooling as wage growth slows. New figures from the Office for National Statistics found the UK's average weekly wage growth eased to 6.6% in the 3 months to November. It's the lowest rate since January last year. It means pay packets grew faster than the rate of price rises. And I'm sure you can feel it right now. Parts of the UK face another very cold night. Temperatures overnight dropping well below freezing. The Met Office saying a cold plunge of Arctic air has moved across and south right down the whole country over the last few days, making it 5 or 6 degrees lower than usual at this time of year. The Met Office has issued yellow weather warnings for snow and ice covering northern areas of England, parts of Wales and all of Scotland. We know that hundreds of schools were closed in Scotland today, that remaining in place until midnight. It's also warned of snow showers, power cuts and possible delays to trains or even air travel. Wrap up warm. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Back now to the United States, where Nigel Farage is live in Iowa.
Well, the weather may be getting very cold back at home in the UK, but I can assure you it was much colder last night at 7 p.m. here in the Midwestern state of Iowa. And yet people still turned out. Not everybody could come. Some were snowed in, but they turned out to caucus. I attended one of those events where I saw members of the public coming in, having their IDs checked, listening to speakers on behalf of the candidates, writing down on a piece of paper the person they wanted to be the Republican nominee. And as you know by now, Donald Trump came top, and came top by a huge historic margin. We'll talk more tonight on the show about that. What I can say is that democracy is alive and well in America compared to the United Kingdom. And I say that because here we have a Conservative government elected with an 80-seat majority, promising you they would take back control of our borders. And yet the amendment that was put down by Robert Jenrick and Sir Bill Cash that said let's put the national interest over the ECHR or the United Nations, only 60 of the Conservative MPs actually bothered or had the guts, frankly, to vote for it. So I'll talk a lot more about that, but first let's get to the dramas in Westminster, and I'm joined by Chris Hope, GB News' political editor, down the line. Chris, what's the latest?
Well, Nigel, I'm not sure if the news has got to you over in the Midwest in America, but the government has had quite a blow inflicted on its own MPs tonight, with as many as 70 MPs, 8 of them from the DUP, the rest the Tory party, voting for a bill cash amendment to try and disapply elements of the Human Rights Act to people the UK wants to send back to Rwanda, arriving here illegally. So a blow for Rishi Sunak and a pause for thought, I think.
We now come to motion number
Right, the line appears to have gone down to Chris Hope, which is not good.
They might lose. Oh, Nigel.
We will wait for him. Is he back?
I'm okay. I can hear you well, Nigel. Yeah, I can hear you now, Nigel. Did you hear that? So okay. Nigel Farage to say...
Yeah, no...
So Nigel just to say in there, Nigel, there was a lot of Tory MPs voted in dozens for a bill cash amendment to try and disapply elements of the Human Rights Act to migrants being flown back to Rwanda. But with me now is Matt Warman. He's deputy chairman of the One Nation group of Tory MPs. Matt, how do you view tonight's vote? You've won. The party, the government has won its vote, but there's quite a big number against the party on these amendments tabled by Bill Cash and latterly Robert Jenrick.
Well, I wouldn't frame it as winning or losing. I think what you heard in the debate today was every member of the Conservative Party wants to tackle this really important issue. I know from my constituency just how important it is. We've had 5-6 hotels used to house refugees in my patch alone. That is a really big issue. We've got to do it, but we've got to do it right. And I think there are a number of people that have made an important point tonight about how they want to see the government tackling it. But there's a very different thing between voting for an amendment and voting against the final bill itself tomorrow. So I think I would hope that we can coalesce around that central theme of this has got to be tackled. It's got to be tackled urgently. And if people do risk voting against third reading, the final vote tomorrow night, then that will only delay things. And that is bad for everyone who cares about this issue.
With these MPs on the right of the party, they think it just won't work. So what's the point? May as well get the bill right first time than show it won't work and then reap the consequences at the ballot box.
Well, it's a fair point, except the problem with the bill as it stands is it is going further than any government has ever gone before. It's already at risk of being challenged in the courts. If you, as you put it, toughen it up, the risk is you end up with nothing because the courts become much more likely to say that it is not acceptable. Now, we can argue about the relationship between the courts and the government as people do, but the reality is if you put yourself in that position, if you end up with it losing, with the government losing later on down the line in court, then we will end up with nothing. That means no planes taking off, no one being part of this policy. So there's a real risk here, and I think people at some point need to take yes for an answer.
Okay. Well, you heard it there from Matt Warman, Nigel Farage, deputy chairman of the One Nation caucus of Tory MPs towards the left of the party. Concerned, but hopes the party can come together before the big third reading vote tomorrow night.
Yeah, well, maybe it will, and maybe they'll vote for the third reading out of loyalty to the party. But I have to say, Chris, it feels like Brexit 2.0 to me, because, of course, all these amendments attempting to disapply parts of the Human Rights Act, remember, that was the incorporation of the ECHR into British law that led to that piece of legislation. Now, there've been a couple of resignations, and, of course, the most prominent of them, a regular GB Newser, Lee Anderson, resigned before the vote as deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, as indeed did Brendan Clark-Smith. And I understand, Chris, that you've got Lee Anderson with you right now. No? No? OK, we haven't got him yet. Well, we're going to get Lee Anderson, I promise you. But as you can see, the situation is moving very, very fast. I have to say, one observation I've got, given where the current Conservative Party are, given the people that voted for them back in 2019 and their majority, is if we had open caucuses in the United Kingdom, I promise you, the Conservative Party's leadership would not be Rishi Sunak, because what happened here in Iowa last night was actually the grassroots telling the establishment Republicans, no, we don't want your choices, we want Trump. I wish we had the same situation. We would not be in this mess. Now, Chris, do you have Lee Anderson now?
Nigel Farage, yeah, I'm with Lee Anderson, of course, the former deputy chairman of the Tory party who resigned tonight over the Rwanda bill. Lee Anderson, why have you resigned?
To be honest with you, Chopper, I don't think I could carry on in my role as Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party when I fundamentally disagree with the bill. I think most of the bill is sound. I think it can work, but we needed it beefing up, we needed it strengthening over the next few days, and I can't be in a position to vote for something which I don't believe in. Look, you know, at the end of the day, small boats are coming, they'll keep coming. I want to see a situation where anybody who arrives illegally in this country has no right at all to claim asylum, no right to claim an appeal, and more importantly, no right to go missing and disappear into the country. And I think this bill could work, but it needs strengthening up, and that's why I backed the amendments and ultimately resigned.
Have you done this for Lee Anderson rather than the party? I mean, number 10, we're thinking, thanks, Lee, you've really thrown a curveball at the Prime Minister by doing this. It's all about you, not the party.
Christopher, don't be ridiculous. I've not done it for Lee Anderson. I've done it for the residents of Ashfield. 55.5% of the residents in Ashfield, when asked by a Telegraph poll, said they want to see the immediate deportation or removal of illegal migrants. I've done it for them, not for Lee Anderson.
There's Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform Party, has said you're now welcome to join the Reform Party, will you?
Look, the Conservative Party gave me a home when I was politically homeless. They backed me, they financially backed me, they wrapped their arms around me. I still think the Conservative Party is the best party moving forward to get us out of this mess. So it's very kind of Richard. We've had a few, few dingoes over the past few weeks, a few arguments. But he's a good man. He's a great man. I like him. I class him as a friend. But I think, the best way forward to solve this problem is a strong Conservative Party with strong MPs like myself.
And you will stand in the next election as a Tory MP?
Of course I will.
But overall, I mean, there's a problem here for Rishi Sunak, because now, will you vote against the bill at third reading?
Well, there's a lot can happen between now and tomorrow evening, Chris. As you know, you're not going to nail me down, but I'm a man of conviction. I like to think that. We'll see what happens over the next 24 hours. There's a lot of discussions going to happen behind closed doors. Like I say, I'm not happy with the bill. I don't want to see boats pulling up to Dover every 10 minutes. I want to see them not coming, and I want to see a bill that delivers that.
Do you want to see that in writing then? Because the PM has told GB News yesterday at Leon Sea that he would overrule Section 39 orders. He would stop these pyjama injunctions stopping flights taking off. Do you want to see that in writing? Is that your red line?
Well, that's encouraging for the boss to say that. Look, I know Rishi wants to sort this out. I've met him many, many times over this problem we've got. He wants to sort it, but I want to see something more substantial, as do the voters in this country. If we get it right, if we get this right, Chopper, Rishi could be the best leader in Europe, because the rest of Europe will follow him.
But if he can't get it right, then your party will be punished at the ballot box.
Well, listen, I'm not quite sure about that, because Labour have got no answer to this. We have reduced crossings by 36% in the past year. We are trying to do the right thing. Labour haven't got a single policy. They keep banging on about 14 years of Tory rule. They haven't come up with one single policy within 14 years. So they're not the answer. We're the answer, but we just need to get tougher.
How does it look, though, you think? The party now looks it's fighting with itself months out from the election. It can't agree on a Rwanda policy.
Look, I don't think the party is fighting with itself. We are a broad church, Chopper, as you know. That's what we always say. Look, disagreements within the party. And this place, Parliament, I think, I've always said this, and this is not being controversial, this place, Parliament, is totally out of touch with the rest of the country. The rest of the country want this sorting out. Like I said before, 55.5% of residents in Ashfield want illegal migrants deported swiftly, more or less the same day. So they need to get in tune with what the constituents are saying.
Well, Nigel Farage, you heard there from Lee Anderson, making very clear he's doing this. He's not off to join the Reform Party, where you were once the leader of its forebear, the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage, but he is doing it, he thinks, to try and send a message to the government overnight to harden up the Rwanda bill and make it work.
Yep, I fully understand what Lee Anderson's saying, but when he says the Conservative Party in the UK is a broad church, yes, it's a broad church, but it no longer has any unifying religion. And churches without religion cannot survive very long, in my view. Chris Hope, thank you very much indeed. And I'm just reminded, folks at home, This is just like Brexit all over again, where a majority of Conservative voters wanted Brexit. And yet, you know, despite that, the party opposed Brexit and did so pretty forcefully. Well, we're over 600 days into this Rwanda farce. 600 days where the government had promised us that people who crossed the English Channel illegally in dinghies would be sent to Rwanda. We've spent hundreds of millions of pounds. Not a single flight has gone. Not one person has gone. And as we go on through this internecine warfare within the Conservative Party, I wonder legally, frankly, all the while we're signed up to the European Convention on Human Rights, to various conventions with the United Nations, frankly, whether any of it is worth a row of beans. I'm joined by immigration lawyer Paul Turner. Paul, welcome back onto the programme. I wonder, with your legal hat on, whether you're somewhat bemused looking at these debates that are going on in the House of Commons. I mean, ultimately, it seems unlikely to me that a Rishi Sunak government is going to ignore the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg.
Well, I would agree, and they had the opportunity, I think it's been put to Mr Sunak, as to whether he would actually be as bold as to say he's going to ignore any Rule 39 injunctions, and he has, how should we put it, not answered the question directly, but said that he's kicked down the road. Now, that might be the usual Sunak kicking it down the road, as in he's frightened to say one thing or the other. As it stands at the moment, I mean, I don't agree with the bill, as you probably haven't understood during our previous discussions, but the amendments, probably the Conservatives last best hope at actually getting any flights off the ground. And as we've seen, they've been rejected by Parliament. The amendments I don't agree with would have stripped the ECHR of any ability to stop the flights. The bill itself, as it stands, preserves under Clause 3 the ability for the UK courts to say that the bill is incompatible with human rights, and Clause 4 allows individuals the right to go to Strasbourg and to make their case in Strasbourg. And at present, the UK tends to follow the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights. So it is easy to see, and if one looks at the UNHCR's most recent report, they've said, yes, we've looked at what's gone on, but quite frankly, nothing's changed on the ground in Rwanda. And according to UNHCR, and we'll be aware of the weight that the Supreme Court put on the UNHCR's finding, they find that the bill as it now stands is still in breach of the UK's international obligations, which doesn't take a genius to work out, would mean that notwithstanding no domestic challenges being possible, that individuals will go to the ECHR, and nothing has changed on the ground in Rwanda. The ECHR are likely to say that removal is unlawful. So in short, the chances of flights taking off before the spring are minimal.
I'd have thought actually the chances of any flights taking off, the chances, Paul, of any flights taking off before the next general election look pretty slim, don't they?
I think that there's a greater chance of Rishi Sunak being voted back as the Prime Minister. That's likely to happen before anybody is removed from Rwanda. And I don't think anyone is going to be removed from Rwanda. And I think the next government are likely to kick this into the long grass where it belongs.
OK, Paul, you couldn't have put it more clearly. We're whistling in the wind. Thank you very much indeed. Now we have another resignation from the government, albeit from a junior position, but Chris Hope will update us right now.
Well, Nigel, here in Westminster, it's all kicking off. Jane Stevenson MP has resigned as a parliamentary private secretary to Kemi Badenoch. She said on social media just moments ago, I don't consider my votes to be anti-government, but they do warrant resignation. She voted for the Bill Cash Amendment on the issue of human rights and disapplying that to migrants being flown back to Rwanda, deported there. In the chamber, she says she paid tribute to Rishi Sunak's work so far and welcomed his commitment to lead talks on better global frameworks. So a third resignation, again, very junior, the lowest rung of government, but all the same, she was a member of the government, a PPS, that means an unpaid role, a bag carrier, if you like. There's further confusion here. I understand that some Tory MPs have, by mistake, voted for Robert Jenrick's motion tonight, Nigel. The word is David Davis MP and another MP. We're getting confirmation on the names, but I think there's been some confusion about who's voting for what tonight, which has delayed the result of the Robert Jenrick MP. Not confirmed yet on David Davis, not sure the names yet, but we understand there's some confusion about who voted for what. But the big number, the big the takeaway from tonight in Westminster is that dozens of Tory MPs have voted against the government to harden up the Rwanda plan. The question for the whips and number 10 tonight is what happens next.
And Chris, just one final thought, and it's difficult to predict. It's moving very quickly. But do you see any Conservative MPs voting against the government's overall bill tomorrow evening?
Well, that is the only question that matters in Parliament tonight. That's a question which will give maybe even Rishi Sunak a sleepless night, Nigel Farage. It's not really clear what will happen. They only need barely half the numbers who voted for the Bill Cash Amendment or even the Robert Jenrick Amendment to maybe defeat the government. It's not entirely clear what the government's working majority is and how many are required. It could be 28, 29 or 30 or 32 because we're not clear how some of the independent former Tory MPs will vote tomorrow night. But it will get very, very close and it could be difficult. And the government could almost by mistake lose its Rwanda plan on a third reading vote tomorrow night. The question now is, what does the government do? Will they try and amend that bill in writing and not rely just on words from Rishi Sunak, who told us on GB News yesterday he would overrule European judges blocking flights? Will they put that in writing? That might be enough. We'll wait and see. It'll be a long night in Westminster, Nigel.
No, it certainly will be, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. Well, one thing that is for certain, folks, is that if the grassroots of the Conservative Party had their way, there wouldn't just be 60 MPs voting for this, there would be nearly all Conservative MPs voting for this. And that's what happened last night here in Iowa. You see, most Iowan state politicians did not back Donald Trump, and yet Iowan voters did. In a minute, I'll be joined by an Iowan politician who is Donald Trump's absolute favourite at this moment in time. I'll be joined by the Iowan Attorney General just in a moment. She's very, very popular. She's even being tipped, perhaps, to become governor at some point in the future.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, as you saw at the top of the show, I did attend the Trump victory party last night, and boy, it was quite a party. And he came onto the stage, and it was interesting to see the prominence of his 2 sons, but also there were members of his close team. I have to say, a far more professional team that he had in either 2016 or 2020, in my opinion. And there were some other people up on the stage. One of them got a very special shout-out.
Attorney General Brenna Bird. She really stepped up. Where is Brenna? Come in.
Thank you. Glad to do it. We need you.
She stepped up. She's going to be your governor someday, I predict. So we'll see. We'll be watching, but she really did. She broke away from the pack.
Or the Attorney General of Iowa, Brenna Bird, joins me now. I mean, kisses and hugs from Donald Trump. Wow.
Yeah, wow. I mean, what an awesome night. What a big victory for President Trump and all the people who supported him.
What was interesting to me, Brenna, looking at the numbers, was in the State House here, and by the way, what a beautiful building it is.
Thank you.
Magnificent. In the State House here, of the 64 people sitting there as Republicans, 42 endorsed Ron DeSantis. In the Senate here at state level, 15 of the 30 endorsed Ron DeSantis. Indeed, you know, even your governor, Kim, I mean, she endorsed Ron DeSantis. What made you decide to go with Trump?
Well, I think he's the one who will end the Biden administration and get our country back on track. We've got some real problems here, and we were all a lot better off when he was president. He did a great job securing the border, for example, leading the economy, you know, you name it. He did a great job.
Did you face much pressure not to endorse him?
Well, I think the caucuses are very heated. You know, it's the first election that we have, a caucus for President of the United States. It's right here in Iowa. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressures out there, a lot of campaigning going on, but I knew what the right thing was to do, and I did that, and I campaigned with President Trump all over the state, whatever they needed, and just, you know, President Trump has the best supporters, people who really care about America and about the policies, what's best for our country.
And it's what struck me about it was it's so grassroots, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, I went to a caucus about 15 minutes outside Des Moines, and it was in a gymnasium of a school, and people turn up and they're given a piece of paper. I mean, it really is democracy in action, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm from a rural area and caucused where I live, and we did it in the school cafeteria with our friends and neighbors, and they believe very strongly in the candidates they support. I mean, President Trump won big in my caucus, 60%, but everybody is cordial, polite, and trying to do the right thing.
And it's free, open debate, but as I say, had it been up to the politicians, the elected politicians in Iowa, to choose who the nominee should be, it would have been Ron DeSantis. When it goes to the people, it's a very, very different choice. You know, right from the start, there have been some people in the Republican Party that have found Donald Trump difficult to stomach. You know, the never-Trumpers, and there's always been that wing there, and you know, we can call them country club Republicans or whatever we want to do. Is he able, and I say this because I did speak to people at that caucus last night that I went to, you know, good people, hard-working Iowans who are Republicans and registered, and they're just worried about all the court cases. They're worried about all the stuff that's coming down the track this year. Is he able, because I thought his speech was quite emollient last night, You know, he was very, very nice to you. But actually, he wasn't disrespectful to the other candidates. Is he able to bring the Republican Party together as a united force going into the elections on November the 5th this year?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he will be our nominee. He will bring everybody together. We will work to win everybody's support. And we have to defeat the Biden administration. And, you know, we have something we say here in Iowa and the country: you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. And that's what he's done. He has shaken things up a little bit.
He's very good at breaking eggs. Of that, there is absolutely no doubt. And there's always a great degree of drama with him. But, I mean, you know, can the Nikki Haley wing of the party reconcile themselves to Donald Trump being the nominee?
Oh, I think so. That's what primaries are for. That's what the process is for. Everybody has their chance to make their case to the American people. And we know that when we have a nominee, and I think it's President Trump, we all get behind that person and support them. That's the way it works.
Oh, look, I mean, I think there's no question, you know, I mean, and whatever happens in New Hampshire, if you look at all the ones that are coming afterwards, he clearly is going to be the nominee. Legal problems aside, you believe he's going to win?
I do, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of confidence. There's a lot of confidence around in the Republican Party at the moment. And what about your future? You're being tipped, you know, live on global television as being someone that's going to be at some point the governor here.
Well, that was very, very kind of him to say that. And I just got elected as Attorney General here.
I know.
Yes, and defeated somebody who was first elected in 1978 when I was 2. And so I have my work cut out for me turning around that office, making sure we're supporting law enforcement, prosecuting criminals. And right now we're spending a lot of energy pushing back against the unconstitutional and illegal things the Biden administration is doing. So, but it was very kind what he said.
So it's a little bit down the track then. It's not going to happen immediately. Now, you've got a job to do. Brenna Bird, really interesting. Great to have you on the programme. And, hey, you picked the winning side, and well done. We'll take a break, and we'll come back to some of the dramas that have been happening in Westminster tonight.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Well, all of the so-called rebel amendments have been heavily defeated in the House of Commons. We have a parliament that is so far away from the centre of gravity of public opinion that it is almost not true. It almost feels to me like we're back in that pre-Brexit period. Parliament just not representing the people. But it's the legal side of this that fascinates me, and clearly that is what the government are absolutely terrified of. The Robert Jenrick resignation as immigration minister was very telling. He said it's pretty clear that the British government basically care more about agreements with the United Nations, about agreements with the European Convention on Human Rights, than they do about putting the national interest first. That was what was so significant, I thought, about the Jenrick resignation. But I wonder, what can we do with these international organisations? And I'm joined again by Paul Turner, immigration lawyer. Paul, you know, the ECHR, we all know why we signed up to it. It was after the Holocaust, it was post-World War II, and indeed we were very instrumental in setting this thing up as an early warning system. Its critics, myself included, would say that it's been, through activism, extended its role in many other ways. But what would happen? What would happen if a British government just said, you know what? This is in our national interest. We are going to ignore what this court in Strasbourg said. What would actually happen?
Well, what we will be doing is joining a quite elite club of nations that include Russia. They have ignored, I think, 20 interim Rule 39 injunctions, and then they were thrown out. So if we want to be seen on a par with Russia, then that is what we would be. We would become an international pariah. It would also have quite grave impacts, so I read, on the Northern Ireland Agreement and the peace that we've seen in Northern Ireland over the last quarter of a century. Now, it may well be that if peace in Northern Ireland is not that important, and I certainly remember growing up, as I'm sure you do, Nigel, in the Troubles when there were bombs going off in Oxford Street. We don't have that anymore, thankfully. And part of that is due to the ECHR. So if one balances peace in the United Kingdom, peace in Northern Ireland developing, and we set that against what is where there's no evidence that actually the new bill, even if it was enforced and 200 or 300 people were sent to Rwanda, whether that would actually have any deterrent effect. So everyone wants to stop illegal crossing. I want to stop illegal crossings. It's not good for people, and it's certainly not good to put vulnerable people into the hands of criminals. But when we look at it, the government promised that they would carry out and publish a review on safe legal routes within 6 months of the bill coming into force. They have put out the report, and they haven't introduced or suggested any new safe legal routes. And last year, there were about 700 people, up to September last year, relocated under legal routes. And if you put that against the number of people recognised as asylum seekers in the United Kingdom, it was about 37,000, 75% of the people that claimed asylum. So by all means, stop the boat, but you need to have a method whereby people can claim asylum and come to the United Kingdom lawfully. And the government wants to have its cake and eat it.
Well, hang on a second, Paul. Hang on a second, Paul. We've had over 500,000 people claim asylum in the UK since 2017. I mean, it's a huge number, isn't it? So it's not as if we've not been doing our bit on the international stage. I would disagree with you on the role of ECHR in the Northern Ireland peace process. I think the Americans had a bit more to do with that. But this idea that we'd be a pariah state, I mean, we were told actually if we left the European Union, we become a pariah state, but we haven't, have we?
Well, that's a political hot cake. No, we haven't become a pariah state. whether we've received all the benefits that certain politicians advocated is a matter for another discussion, not one for today. But yes, you're right, we haven't become a prior state. I can still go on holiday to Europe, as I'm sure we all can, though when I arrive they usually laugh at the colour of my passport and ask me more questions. But leading the ECHR, which, as you say, what rightly mentioned, was pretty much drafted by a British barrister after the Second World War. Now, it has incrementally increased, and there's a legitimate conversation to be had about whether it's gone too far. But in respect of Rwanda, we're talking about the protection of people's lives. Now, that's one of the core foundations behind the ECHR. So we're not talking about whether or not people should get 2 pints of milk a week or 3 pints of milk a week, and relying on the ECHR for what would be a spurious argument. We're talking about people's safety.
All right. Paul, as ever, thank you for your legal opinion. And nobody at home can ever say on GB News you don't hear both sides of the argument. I fundamentally disagree with Paul. I think putting the national interest first is what we have to do, and unless we ignore these outdated conventions, we will not get back control of our borders, an issue that is equally as big, if not even bigger, here in the USA. Now, today, and at last, something sensible's happened. The Fujitsu Europe director, Paul Patterson, came before the Business and Trade Committee and admitted culpability. Yes, he did. He said he was truly sorry for the glitches that had occurred within the system. He accepted that their evidence had been used in the prosecutions, and he said that Fujitsu would have a moral obligation to contribute to the £1 billion compensation scheme. Well, of course they do. The argument, folks, I was making last week was that actually this could have happened an awful lot more quickly. Let's listen to what he had to say earlier on today.
We did have bugs and errors in the system, and we did help the Post Office in their prosecutions of the sub-postmasters. For that, we are truly sorry. Information that was shared with the Post Office as part of our contract with them was very clear. So the Post Office also knew there were bugs and errors.
Well, at last some admission, but you know, a proper leader would have hauled him into 10 Downing Street last week, would have made Fujitsu pay for all of the compensation, and we learned that actually their government contracts are now, and I had a figure of 3.4 billion they've been paid by the British government. Actually, it would appear that it's been double that over the course of the last 15 years. 7 or 8 million quid that has come out of public funds. It is a truly extraordinary sum of money. Now, for the first time ever, GB News were able to ask the Palestinian ambassador a question in London today. Here was the question, and here was the answer.
I have taken part in almost every demonstration, and I was a speaker in most of them, if not, I mean the central ones. I haven't seen, chantings that people are accusing these people. I have seen love. I have seen love. I have seen commitment to international legality. I have seen diversity. I have seen unity. I have seen all colors, all religions. I have seen many, many Jewish brothers and sisters in these demos, and not just for the last 100 days, but for the last 75 years with us. I have seen the best Britain offers. And to use one person here and two individuals there to conflate and to actually frame millions is a very bad exercise. We should focus on the millions, not the 2-3 individuals. The millions are calling out for an immediate ceasefire. That is something so humane, that is something so British, that is something that should be hailed and respected. The millions are demanding an end of Israel's occupation. That is the policy of the UK. That is the international consensus resolutions. And the millions are promising to create an agency to put pressure on all that to happen. So let's not defame and defile and desecrate the most beautiful thing that happened the only beautiful thing that happened in the last 100 days, which is the outpouring raw emotions and principle solidarity.
Well, I may not agree with much of that, but I tell you what, that opinion may well have a big impact on British politics, and I'll talk about that tomorrow when I'm back in London, if the weather allows me to get back. And the What the Farage moment of the day is, well, the ULEZ protesters, the Blade Runners, have gone a step further in Bromley Borough today. 8, not just ULEZ cameras have been taken down, but actually whole posts carrying traffic lights at major junctions have been felled to the ground. You can see these pictures on your screens. It's caused absolute, total traffic confusion during some of the busiest times of the day. And look, I understand the upset about these charges Sadiq Khan has brought in. I understand that it's the poor and the elderly that are picking up the bills. But I do wonder whether this campaign against ULEZ is perhaps not going just a step too far. In a moment, I'll be joined by Bob Vander Plaats, CEO of the Family Leader, a faith conservative organisation here in Iowa, big supporter of Ron DeSantis. I'll ask the question, does it make sense for Ron to continue with his campaign?
On Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, the Rwanda rebels are in crunch talk this evening. One of the leaders of the 5 families, Miriam Case, will give her exclusive inside story to us. And remember this? I am joined by the son of England World Cup winner Nobby Stiles, who's leading a lawsuit against the FA over brain injuries allegedly suffered during his dad's career. Find out why the Archbishop of Woke, Justin Welby, is facing calls to resign. And there is the most exciting pay-per-view anywhere on telly. It's Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 to 11 p.m. It's the only show in town.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that Ron DeSantis has been an incredibly effective governor of Florida. The place is booming. They're not just leaving other parts of America to go to Florida, they're leaving other parts of the world to go to Florida. They're so impressed, are they, by the whole regime that he's put in place, and of course the fight back against woke in education and everything else. And Miami, I mean, every time you go it's almost unrecognizable. It's so much bigger than it was before. But was he wise to run for the presidency at this stage, and given the fact that the guy is only in his mid-40s? Well, Bob Vander Plaats is CEO of The Family Leader, a socially conservative Christian organisation here in Iowa. Welcome.
It's good to be with you.
To the programme. Now, you were an all-out Ron DeSantis man, weren't you?
I was all-out Ron DeSantis, and part of it is what you just recognized, you know, what he did in Florida. I mean, exceptional leadership, exemplary leadership. But then he won in a landslide in the midterms. Took a toss-up state, turned it deep red, and won in demographics we never win in. I thought that's the kind of guy we need in order to win in 2024.
Yes, I mean, what did he win by? 18 points.
Yeah, I think it's close to 20.
Yeah, having won by literally a very, very tiny margin before. The other thing, of course, about DeSantis that's impressed me, and we were locked down 3 times by our national government, the 3rd time for reasons I've never quite fully understood, is that he made a very, very big call, didn't he, on lockdown? A very big call. Yeah. The weather, of course, helps in Florida, but California could have done the same.
Oh, sure.
Chose not to. That was a big part of it as well, wasn't it?
It was a huge part of it. Matter of fact, he took on Fauci, he took down the lockdown regime, he kept the beaches open, the schools open, he kept the churches open.
Yeah.
And he really pushed back on all this mandate stuff, like where's the science behind all this vaccines, and why are we quarantining healthy people? And so I think he led the way you want people to lead, like Governor Reynolds did here in Iowa. They treated Iowans and Floridians like adults, and I think people respected that.
But he spent a lot of time and money here in Iowa. He's been to all 99 counties.
You bet he has.
You've been out with him on the road as well.
Yes.
But it kind of hasn't worked, has it? Donald Trump's appeal is still very strong among the grassroots.
Well, there's no doubt. We always said, that Iowa will have done its job if we present America an alternative. And so therefore you got the former president, Donald Trump, and then an alternative, I believe, still in Governor DeSantis. And now America, you get to choose. So for example, last night, everybody says, Donald Trump dominated. He's the former president. He's won Iowa twice, 2016, 2020. And yet half of the people said we're looking for an alternative. So if you don't have Nikki Haley in the race, and say it's just to say, all of a sudden it's 51-40. And all of a sudden people are saying, this is game on, this is a real competition. So I think now when they go into New Hampshire, they go into South Carolina, and I think Nikki Haley's got a short runway now. I think after South Carolina, she'll be done. Now we'll be down to a 2-person race. And now America's got a choice. And when you put it to a 2-person race, the numbers look completely different.
So you're not giving up. So you're not giving up.
Absolutely not. Because the other thing you have to take a look at, Nigel, not only when it's a 2-person race, the numbers look a lot different. But you also got a former president, Donald Trump, right or wrong, but this government's weaponized against him. He's in legal jeopardy all over the place. You better have a strong second-place person right now, or a strong alternative person right now, so that all of a sudden Trump can't be on the ballot. You've got somebody who can step in and be on the ballot.
Okay, so you're desperate for him to make the last 2 then, basically.
What's that?
You're desperate that he makes the last 2.
Oh, I definitely believe he makes the last 2. And so, because I think, Nikki may have a little bit of a light that will shine in New Hampshire. I don't think she'll win, but she'll have a light to shine.
Yep.
But she's going to get crushed in her home state of South Carolina. And when you get crushed in your home state of South Carolina, you can't go on. You lost your home state.
Yeah.
That's when I believe DeSantis makes his stand.
Very, very interesting. Well, we've given some good balance on this programme this evening. And what I love about all this is the energy, the engagement, the sense that democracy is real and alive in America.
Yeah. Iowans take this very serious. They're very savvy, and they believe they have a country worth fighting for. So if I'm disappointed in anything last night, it's that the turnout numbers weren't where I wanted them to be.
But the weather was ghastly.
Yeah, it could be the weather, but Iowans are a tough lot.
Yeah.
I still think that we should add more show up at the polls.
Well, I did hear reports of people literally being snowed in some of the rural areas, so I don't know.
Sure.
Bob, pleasure to have you on the programme. Pleasure to get the Ron DeSantis point of view. Now, I am hoping and praying that Des Moines Airport is fully operational this afternoon, and I can actually have a much better journey home than I had getting here. So I hope to join you live tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock UK time. But I believe the snow coming your way. Let's have a look.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. It is going to be cold tonight, and with that, the risk of some harsh frost, icy patches, and a little bit of further snow. A low pressure system across northern parts of the UK today brought some significant snow here. However, the worst of that is clearing away towards the east, with just some outbreaks of rain, sleet or snow pushing their way southwards across parts of northern central England and Wales as we go through this evening and overnight. Most of this breaking up though as it goes. Further north, clearer skies for many, but some snow showers feeding in, particularly to northern parts of Scotland. Under those clear skies, temperatures plummeting. Some places could fall into negative double figures, so a widespread harsh frost and some icy patches to watch out for. As we go through Wednesday, there is a system towards the south of us. This may bring a bit of rain, perhaps some sleet or snow to immediate southern counties, but for most of us, it is actually going to stay largely dry. Plenty of winter sunshine on offer tomorrow, but there will be some snow showers feeding down on a brisk northerly wind, mainly affecting northern Scotland. Despite the sunshine though, it is going to feel cold, temperatures generally only getting a few degrees above freezing. More fine sunny weather to come as we go through Thursday, but we stick with that brisk northerly wind, so more snow showers across northern parts of Scotland, perhaps Northern Ireland, and some western and eastern coastal parts could see some wintry showers for a time. Most inland areas though staying dry and fine, with more fine weather to come as we go through Friday, but turning wet, windier and milder by the weekend.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big story.